warm welcome to our viewers here in Lagos and across the globe. You're watching The World Today, and I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up. Several hostages abducted by suspected jihadists in central Mali freed. The World Today begins right now. Staying in the United States, a Chinese student has been sentenced to 9 months in prison for threatening to cut off the hands of a fellow female student who put up pro-democracy flyers on campus. 26-year-old Zhao Lei Wu was arrested in 2022, and a federal judge ordered his deportation after serving his sentence. The student he threatened had put up flyers at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, which reads, "We want freedom, we want democracy, we want to love, stand with Chinese people." The pro-democracy flyers were put up in late October 2022 during a wave of activism among Chinese people abroad. Wu made a series of threats to the victim via the WeChat messaging app, email, and Instagram. He was also accused of stalking her. During his conviction in January this year, acting U.S. Attorney Joshua S. Levy said Wu's violent threats achieved his goal of instilling fear in his victim and others who might want to speak out against the Chinese government. And the historic hush money trial of former U.S. President Donald Trump is continuing at the Manhattan Criminal Court in New York. Former tabloid executive David Packer is taking the stand as a witness. Mr. Trump had described him as a nice guy outside the courthouse. The trial is expected to take 6 to 8 weeks from start to finish. The former president is facing at least 88 charges of the 4 criminal indictments in Georgia, New York, Washington, D.C., and Florida. He has pleaded not guilty to every single charge in these cases. Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein 2020 rape conviction has been overturned by New York's top court on the basis that he did not receive a fair trial. The Court of Appeals found that prosecutors were allowed to call witnesses whose accusations were not part of the charges against him. The court reached a 4-3 ruling today, and the 72-year-old is expected to remain in prison for a separate conviction for rape. Accusations against him began in 2017 and sparked the Me Too movement, which exposed sexual abuse at the highest levels of the Hollywood film industry and beyond. He faced 2 trials in New York, where he was jailed for 23 years in 2020 for raping 2 women, and in California, where he was last year sentenced to 16 years for raping a woman in a Beverly Hills hotel. And over in West Africa, where local reports claim that several hostages abducted by suspected jihadists in central Mali have been freed. Local groups and officials in Mali had been calling for the release of more than 110 people kidnapped last Tuesday. The RFI news agency reports that several dozens of people were released on Wednesday, mainly villagers whose authorities had signed informal peace agreements with some jihadist groups operating in their zone. The hostages had been traveling in at least 3 buses that were stopped by armed men and driven into a forest in the center of the country last week before being intercepted. The kidnappers, according to villagers in the communities, are believed to be jihadists from the Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, hundreds of civilians, including at least 56 children, were massacred by Burkina Faso's military in a single day this year. This is according to rights group the Human Rights Watch. The group says its investigation found that during the attacks in February, the army killed 179 people in Sora village and 44 others in the nearby Nondin village. HRW terms the mass killings the worst army abuse incidents in the country in nearly a decade. However, the Burkina Faso authorities are yet to comment on the report. Africa's growth is below the pre-COVID-19 pandemic rate, but remains the second highest globally, says the new economic report on Africa by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Most importantly, the report urges leaders to turn the tide of poverty and structural unemployment on the continent. Our correspondent, Ayola Kasim, has more.
In Africa, poverty, inequality, food insecurity, and unemployment continue to be aggravated, with 476 million people, or about one-third of the continent's population, is estimated to be in poverty in 2024. That is 50 million more than the number recorded in 2019. And with an average real GDP growth below the continent's potentials in recent years, financing development by countries in the region is an ongoing challenge. And when this is mixed with the issues of climate change, even those in the know still have questions about how Africa can achieve its green mandate.
And now the cost is almost close to 5% of GDP for almost most of the African countries. And the question is, how do we deal with this kind of situation? Most of the resources, which are environmental resources, are not coming as fast as people need, while they are still addressing the other issues. And meaning that there is a high cost for not having the investment grade, meaning you cannot raise money cheaply. So how do you finance development at the same time raise money to finance climate? And that's where you find the intersection of what this one means.
The experts tell us the resources to achieving a just transition is possible because Africa has the potential to leapfrog. But to be able to take that big jump, countries need to promote low-carbon development pathways with gradual transition away from their fossil needs, leverage critical minerals, shift to collaborative governance, and harness frontier technologies.
We just also highlight in the report, this cannot be done as business as usual. So while we combine different elements, and perhaps none of the elements alone is new, together it's a new approach and it will require a major transformation, transformational leadership, and also systemic changes in areas of economic governance. It will have to, learn from the past experience how to effectively deploy it and utilize natural resources. And human endowments and human capital will need to be developed also. And of course, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement can play a major role in this transition.
Like in any transition, there will be winners and losers. And we need to make sure that we are taking sufficient measures to take into account the impact of different parts of the population and what does it mean, and the incentives to actually, accelerate the type of private sector and industries and innovations that can capitalize on our unique resources for green transition, and at the same time enable this transition to be smooth for the sectors that need to adapt.
Of course, many here know that the journey towards a just transition is not easy, but acknowledge it is a necessary one. The journey that Africa must take to ensure its citizens are not left behind. From the UNECA headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Welcome back. In commemoration of this year's World Malaria Day, the African Youth Growth Foundation is urging both state and federal governments in Nigeria to prioritize investments in malaria control programs, including ensuring the availability of mosquito-treated nets for vulnerable populations. Additionally, the foundation is urging the government to expedite discussions regarding the availability of the newly approved malaria vaccine. Malaria remains a significant cause of mortality in Africa, resulting in over 100,000 deaths annually in Nigeria alone.
April the 25th of every year is set aside by the World Health Organization, WHO, to mark World Malaria Day. And this news conference in Abuja is just to highlight key demands on the Nigerian government as it prepares to mark the 2024 edition.
You stated quite a number of...
According to the WHO, 249 million cases of malaria were reported in 2022, and 76% of these cases were children under 5 years. The disease has accounted for an estimated 608,000 deaths in Africa alone. In Nigeria, 68 million cases and 194,000 fatalities were recorded in 2021, making it one of the deadliest diseases in the country.
Estimated 4 out of 5 malaria-related deaths in the African.
At this pre-World Malaria Day news conference, participants are asking the government to urgently scale up malaria interventions.
We are calling on the government to prioritize investment in malaria programming and implementation in the country. We are appealing to Nigerians to adopt best practices in preventing malaria within their neighborhood.
Over the years, the Nigerian government has rolled out strategic plans to eliminate malaria. Some of these interventions include the inauguration of End Malaria Council in 2022, Rollback Malaria Program, the National Malaria Elimination Program, and several other strategic plans. Aside from these interventions, the federal government also, in August 2023, gave approval for the use of the R21 malaria vaccine.
The R21 malaria vaccine dossier complied substantially with best international standards. It was also adjudged that the vaccine's known potential benefits outweigh the risks. The Joint Review Committee recognized the importance of an effective malaria vaccine that has 75% protection as an additional interventional tool as a critical need in Nigeria that has the highest malaria burden.
However, almost 1 year after the approval was given, the vaccines are nowhere to be found, and malaria continues to kill Nigerians in their numbers.
Nigeria's permanent representative to ECOWAS, Ambassador Musa Nuhu, says the African security landscape is continuously changing due to new, intricate threats. These challenges necessitate a united response that transcends national borders. Ambassador Nuhu made these remarks during the inaugural joint meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council with ECOWAS. He emphasized that this joint meeting marks a pivotal moment in the collective endeavor to achieve stability in the region since the Peace and Security Council's establishment. During his address, he urged council members to explore avenues of cooperation, including concerted efforts to maintain a zero-tolerance stance against unconstitutional changes of government and implement effective counterterrorism measures.
In the course of our joint consultation, we are expected to explore areas of cooperation, including making concerted effort on developing strategies to sustain zero tolerance for unconstitutional changes of government, and also come up with recommendations on effective counter-terrorism measures. We will also discuss mobilizing resources for regional and continental peace initiatives, as well as building synergies, coordination, and complementarity in our endeavors. Therefore, I want to seize this opportunity to urge all of us to engage in an in-depth discussion that will allow us to identify areas of potential synergies and foster coherent response to achieve this political stability that we have been yearning for in our continent. The African Union engagement with regional economic communities should involve discussions on economic development, humanitarian intervention, social cohesion, infrastructural development, which are building blocks for good governance that will guarantee peaceful and stable Africa.
Over 282 million people in 59 countries and territories suffered acute food insecurity in 2023, and this is according to the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations says these numbers represent a 24 million increase in comparison to the previous year. The report reveals that conflict, extreme weather events, and economic shocks are the main drivers behind acute hunger worldwide. The report is authored by the Global Network Against Food Crisis, an alliance of the humanitarian and development actors launched by FAO with other partners in 2016.
The single most significant driver of acute food insecurity is conflict and violence. This was the primary driver in 20 of the 59 countries and represented in absolute terms the key driver for the largest number of people in acute food insecurity. The second driver then relates to extreme weather events. We've had the hottest year on record. The El Nino phenomenon, just to name one of the factors, has been a key driver behind it. So climatic events was the second most significant driver, and economic shocks was the third most important driver. And again, here I think it's important not to view these three drivers in isolation. What we see is that often, typically, these three have been mutually reinforcing and together exacerbated the acute food insecurity situation. We've seen a significant deterioration in the last 12 months. And it's in the last 12 months because it's 12 months ago this month that fighting started in the country, again showing this direct relationship between conflict and acute food insecurity. But the other thing that we've seen in Sudan is the impact of the climate crisis and the climate change. Some of the communities I visited in Red Sea State, for example, showed me basic agricultural infrastructure that had been washed away the last time there were significant rains, earth dams that were required to keep water in place to allow for hand irrigation of fields, for example, had been broken through because the rains came much more quickly and with larger amounts than they were anticipating. And so again, you know, we see this overlap geographically between conflict, between climate crisis, and indeed economic shocks as well.
And finally, on the program, the 2024 International Women's Empowerment Convention has wrapped up in Dubai. The aim of the two-day program is to inspire women to set enterprising goals, overcome obstacles, to succeed and realize their full career potential. This year's theme is tagged Big Goals, Bold Choices. Women were tasked to be a goal-getter to achieve their professional and financial goals and not to limit themselves.
If English isn't your first language, then I want to thank you again for coming today. But I guess you didn't have this choice because the lineup of speakers is truly phenomenal. I already told you yesterday this. And today will be one more unbelievable days of insight.
I think that evolves, honestly, and I think everyone has a different path. There's not like one recipe for every single person and you have to follow this. It's also, everyone's mind is different, everyone's body is different, and everyone's timing is different. For me, it happened very early in my life, but there are many examples in many aspects and careers where it happens later in life. And I wouldn't say it was like one day I woke up and I said, I'm going to be successful or I'm going to be a champion, because I never had that. I was confident in my ability, but I never had that outwardly confidence that portrayed onto others. Or, you know, I would never tell my father, oh, I'm going to be holding the Wimbledon trophy. And the interesting part is he never shared that with me as well. He never said that the epitome of success was holding a Wimbledon trophy. It was about the little steps and seeing rewards and then getting there. And if one day it happens, then isn't that an amazing gift?
I would like to say I'm proud to be a woman and I'm proud to be here today. And in general, I'm proud of women because our life is much more challenging than men's life. I'm not trying to be sexist, but it's true. We have more on our shoulders, we have to be stronger. And so yeah, I'm proud to be part of this group of women, and you know, I believe in sorority.
Inspiring. Well, that's a wrap on the show. Thank you for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers.